A banker by the name of David Hannum once visited P.T. Barnum's circus. Barnum had an unauthorized copy of the famous Cardiff Man hoax statue. Barnum was, of course, famous for the hoaxes he put on in his sideshows and museums alongside real-life curiosities. While looking at the Cardiff Man statue, Hannum shook his head and remarked, "A sucker is born every minute." That saying would very quickly be misattributed to Barnum himself. Whatever else one might say about P.T. Barnum, he knew how to draw a crowd and work them with oddities and curiosities. One of those curiosities included dancing and acrobatic acts using dwarfs. In today's episode, we'll explore a case of love, both requited and unrequited, and a life in P.T. Barnum's famous shows. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Me, Myself, and I History, where weird history and strange happenings in the universe are always on the menu. My name is Seraphim. On Halloween of 1841, in Middleborough, Massachusetts, Huldah Pierce and James Sullivan Bump saw the birth of their first of two daughters. They named her Mercy Lavinia Bump. In a matter of months, they began to realize that their little girl was not growing so fast. She had a condition we know today as proportional dwarfism, which is a condition of the pituitary gland. It causes those who have the condition to look like miniature adults with properly proportioned bodies and heads, but the size of small children when they're fully grown. Mercy was descended from a family of Frenchmen and some Mayflower Pilgrims, two families that had intermarried before. She was, in every sense, a daughter of the genteel old settler families of Massachusetts. She was also a perfectly normal little girl in every way, save for her diminutive size. In spite of that diminutive size, she went from an unknown school teacher to a riverboat entertainer to one half of the best-known entertainment power couples of the day. Although Mercy was very tiny, her parents didn't coddle her. She was expected to do chores like any other child would be. They made some concessions, like step stools, so she could cook or serve food at the table, but otherwise she was expected to help out. Her parents strongly encouraged her to obtain a trade in order to support herself when she became an adult. At the age of 16, like many young women in that time, she began to teach school. It was a good trade for students with good grades to transition into the 19th century and to get a good start in life. With marriage as a dwarf unlikely, she would need a trade that would not go out of demand as many were at that time. I mean, the Second Industrial Revolution was starting to take a toll on many traditional trades and put them out of work. Mercy's cousin owned a riverboat that had onboard entertainments. When she was 18, he asked her to come aboard for the summer and earn some money. This is where she took the stage name that she would be remembered by for the rest of her life. Not wanting her real name widely known, she adopted her middle name, Lavinia, in place of Mercy, and then adopted her mother's maiden name, Warren. Thus, a star was born. Lavinia Warren starred as a chanteuse, that is, something like a nightclub singer today. She was billed as the Lilliputian queen, alongside of another woman, Sylvia Hardy, the American giantess, who was 8 foot tall. They sometimes performed together, sometimes separately. They were also bunkmates and were soon good friends, mismatched as they were. Lavinia became known for her gracious style, her beautiful singing and dancing, and most of all for her charisma. At the end of the summer, Mercy, now known as Lavinia, asked to stay on. The fame of the Lilliputian queen, Lavinia Warren, soon spread. P.T. Barnum was looking for a new act. Booking a ride on the ship in 1862, he saw the show and he loved what he saw. She would be a perfect addition to Barnum's American Museum in New York City. All the other diminutive stars in his show were bachelor men, all of them eligible, and having a beautiful, if very tiny woman in the show would not only enhance the show, it might make one of those bachelors change status, and that was something that P.T. Barnum could bank on. The first person in Barnum's show to meet Lavinia was George Nutt, publicly known as Commodore Nutt. George Nutt was traveling with a circus when he met Barnum the year before. Barnum hired Nutt immediately and gave him the stage name of Commodore Nutt and provided him with a wardrobe of naval uniforms in his size and a carriage shaped like a giant English walnut. Nutt and his act was one of the major attractions of the American Museum. Nutt knew his fame and his worth, such as they were. He fell head over heels for Lavinia Warren. It was love at first sight. He was prepared to do anything to win her over. There was just one problem. Lavinia Warren was 21 and George Nutt was only 14. Warren's attitude toward Nutt was akin to the young woman who pats the young boy on the head when he starts crushing on her. With a 7-year age gap, she simply had no interest in Nutt whatever. But there was someone she did have an interest in: Charles Sherwood Stratton. Charles Stratton was born on 4 January 1838 in Bridgeport, Connecticut. He was a comparatively large child at 9 pounds 8 ounces or 4.3 kilograms in weight. At around a year old, his growth slowed down significantly. His alarmed parents took him to a doctor who pronounced him simply very small but otherwise normal and healthy. All of his parts were working properly, and his mental development was fine too. At 5 years old, he was only 1 inch taller than when he was 1, and weighed the same 15 pounds as then as well. As it turns out, he also had proportional dwarfism. When P.T. Barnum heard about Stratton, he contacted his parents, and soon he was teaching the boy how to do comical banter with another actor, how to sing, how to dance. To market the act, Barnum gave him the stage name of General Tom Thumb after the English fairy tale. In the mid-1840s, Barnum took Tom Thumb on a tour of Europe that lasted 3 years. He performed for Queen Victoria, he met the future King Edward VII, and he triumphed at the Théâtre du Vaudeville in Paris. By the time of his return to the United States in 1848, he was one of the best-known entertainer celebrities on earth, and he was only 10 years old. At the age of 22, he would only be 2'11" or 88.9 centimeters tall. Like Commodore Nutt, General Thumb fell head over heels for Lavinia Warren. That same exact day, Thumb pulled Barnum aside and begged him to play matchmaker. He promised Barnum that he could publicize the wedding if he did. Dollar signs must have appeared in Barnum's eyes. It was exactly what he had hoped for, and it happened far faster than he could dare believe it would. Barnum, doing his part, began the matchmaking line. He began giving what was meant to be perceived as fatherly advice to Lavinia, pointing out Tom Thumb's virtues, his fame, and his wealth. Whether or not virtue or fame meant anything to Lavinia, wealth did. She was soon courting Thumb, and they were getting along famously. Now, don't get me wrong here, I think it was true requited love, but other motivations may have come into play first, considering the end result. But more on that in a moment. Thumb and Warren hit it off well. Poor Commodore Nutt didn't take well to being snubbed by Warren. He practically pined for her affections, which he was never to get. It created a great deal of friction between him and Thumb. One day backstage, they got into fisticuffs over her. On another occasion, Thumb and Warren were going to have a date at P.T. Barnum's house. Nutt found out and decided to crash their date out of spite. And crash it he did, only to find out that Thumb had just proposed to Warren and she had gladly accepted. Barnum tried to play matchmaker for Nutt and set him up with Lavinia's sister, Minnie. Yes, there's irony here. Minnie was also a proportional dwarf. He went so far as to pose them in a proposal picture, but it was all fake. Minnie didn't want Nutt either.
I don't think so. No, 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 no. I don't think so. No, 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 no. It's never, ever, 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 ever gonna happen.
Nutt was so hurt by the whole thing that he swore off women forever. As a side note, he stayed single for 15 years and then married in 1878, just 3 years before he died of kidney failure. True to his nature, Barnum orchestrated the whole shebang. Tom Thumb and Lavinia Warren were about to go from the most popular entertainers of their day to America's first entertainer power couple. Newspapers across North America and Europe carried the happy news. The wedding dress was made by Madame Ellen Demarest, the 19th century version of Donatella Versace. It was in the window display in her shop for weeks before the wedding. The wedding took place at the very fashionable Grace Church, an Episcopalian church at the corner of Broadway and East 10th Street in New York City, presided over by the Reverend Wiley. In a very ironic turn of events, Barnum talked Commodore Nutt into being General Tom Thumb's best man at the wedding. The New York Times reported that Nutt looked ill at the wedding. They wrote off the rumors of jealousy as nothing more than ill-bred gossip habits that some people have. The wedding was free, but followed by a reception for 5,000 people, for which P.T. Barnum had sold tickets at $75 each. The $375,000 generated in 1862 is equivalent to more than $11.7 million in 2024. Thumb and Warren were placed atop a grand piano to greet the reception goers. One gift was a miniature carriage gifted by Queen Victoria herself. Others included a miniature billiards table, Tiffany jewelry, and other fabulous gifts. The whole event only made the couple more famous. They were invited to the White House by Abraham Lincoln on their honeymoon. Lincoln stooped down to the diminutive lady and kissed her on the cheek, which she thought quite rude. Lincoln made a joke about the differences in their altitudes and then added, "Sometimes God does funny things, and here you have the long and the short of it." Soon after the honeymoon, Barnum restarted the public appearances of the couple. About a year into the appearances, Lavinia started appearing on stage with a baby whom she would hold and cuddle during her performance. The public ate it up. The newlywed power couple now had a child, or so they thought. She never claimed the child. In fact, it was a child from a local orphanage. Lavinia noted that the child was getting too big to be credibly called hers. Since there was about to be another big tour coming up, she suggested sending someone ahead to each stop in the tour and borrow a suitably small child from a local orphanage. Besides, it would save on childcare costs, right? Barnum agreed, and several children got their cameos in Lavinia's arms. For 20 years, Warren and Thumb would appear on tour or at the American theater. Lavinia learned to like the high life and the expensive things like jewelry and fancy dresses. Unfortunately, when Tom Thumb died of a stroke in 1883, Lavinia didn't have enough savings to retire on. She soon met another set of proportional dwarfs, Count Primo Magri and Baron Giuseppe Magri, his brother. Of course, their titles were no more real than Thumb's rank of general, but it was good for showbiz. Soon, Primo and Lavinia were married. It wasn't the event that her marriage to Tom Thumb was, but they soon put together an opera company of little people that included a whole roster of others. Alas, all good things must come to an end, as the truism says. And so it was. The public's hunger for little people entertainers waned around the turn of the 20th century. Lavinia was no slacker, though. She decided to try her hand at film. She appeared in the silent movie The Lilliputian's Courtship in 1915. It wasn't a great success. They even tried a guest appearance at Lilliputia, also known as Midget Village on Coney Island. Soon, Primo and Lavinia moved back to her hometown of Middleborough, Massachusetts, where they opened an ice cream parlor and occasionally gave shows on weekends. Mercy Lavinia Bump, better known as Lavinia Warren, died on 25 November 1919 at the age of 78. She was buried next to Tom Thumb in his hometown of Bridgeport, Connecticut. His headstone is a very large obelisk with a statue of him on top of it. Hers is a simple plaque that says, "His wife." And there you have it, the unusual life and very common death of Lavinia Warren, one half of the original American entertainer power couple. She went from unknown teacher to riverboat chanteuse to worldwide celebrity to small-town businesswoman. She helped P.T. Barnum's ever-evolving list of shows and tours. She even put up with bad jokes by a sitting president who didn't understand decorum or personal space. If you liked the content here today, remember to hit that like and subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and tell your friends and family who like weird history and invite them to listen in. Until next time, my friends, this is Seraphim with Me, Myself, and I History, signing off.